The locker room is paying attention to what you're doing. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for March the 6th. We are calling a little bit of an audible here. We are going to punt on doing a mailbag till next week. Next week, we will have you covered there. You can check out our print mailbag on the mmqb.com with all the answers to all of your questions. And again, we're going to get back to doing a mailbag next week once the dust settles on the first few days of free agency. But I did want to get you guys a Breer Report this morning on some of the machinations in the NFL of the last couple of days. And obviously, because we are ahead of the beginning of the league year, which is Wednesday, ahead of the tampering period, which is Monday, there are teams getting their houses in order. That means trade requests are going in. That means players are getting cut. That means teams are moving money around in their contracts. And so we wanted to pick out three in particular that happened over the last 24 hours or so that got a lot of people's attention. And the first one is Maxx Crosby signing a deal at $35.5 million per year to stay in Las Vegas. This wasn't something that the Raiders needed to do. Maxx Crosby has 2 years left on his contract. But with a new regime coming in, with Tom Brady now having more influence as the minority owner, with John Spytek in as the general manager, with Pete Carroll, of course, in as the head coach, I think it made sense to do this. And it made sense to do this not because he's just a great player. It goes beyond that. And it's similar to what Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler did when they got in there 3 years ago and extended Crosby as one of their first moves. A lot of times when you come in as a first-year head coach, first-year general manager, you want to make some moves that signify who you're going to be going forward, who you want to be going forward. And I think that's exactly what this is. Maxx Crosby is the type of guy who can carry the flag for Pete Carroll's program because of what he's about. And I think that's the huge part of this is you go in, you survey the landscape. And I think a lot of times, and again, there are 7 teams with new coaches. So I think this applies to all the teams with new coaches. The locker room is paying attention to what you're doing. I mean, imagine you're in a workplace and your boss comes in. You're going to pay attention to the first couple of things he does. You're going to pay attention to what the first person he hires is like. You're going to pay attention to the first person he gives a raise. What's that guy about? Because that's going to reflect some of the values that the new boss is going to have. The same thing applies in the NFL with new coaches, new general managers. They come in. They know the locker room is paying attention to who and what they're rewarding. And I think that's why you reward Maxx Crosby, because you look at it and you say, this guy's going to be a captain for us going forward. We are paying a guy based not only on what we think he can be, because you're not going to pay him if you don't think can be a great player over the next few years, particularly not at that level. But you want to show the locker room, hey, we're going to reward guys who do the right thing. We've got a couple guys here who we don't have to wait on. We don't have to wait to see what they're about. We know what they're about. We're going to reward them right away so they can come in right away and carry the flag for our program. And so I think from that perspective, it was a smart move for Spytek and Carroll and Brady to say, okay, here's a guy who stands for everything we want to stand for over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. And this is a guy who can carry the flag for our program. So when you hit the ground running in April and you have the start of your off-season program, you've got a guy in-house who's already bought into what you're trying to do and can already help sell to the rest of the locker room what you're trying to do. The other effect, of course, this is going to have is on the rest of the league. Again, he is now the highest paid non-quarterback in all of football. That was Nick Bosa at $34 million a couple of years ago. Justin Jefferson beats that last year at $35 million. Now we have Maxx Crosby at $35.5 million. It's a tick over, but that's significant because I think that opens the door for other guys to ask for that. And there are 2 guys in particular, I think, that in this year's group that are still under contract. They're not free agents, but in this year's group of players that could be looking for contract extensions that really stick out as guys that can look at this and say, I've got a chance to really move the needle. One is Jamar Chase, the Triple Crown winner in Cincinnati. The other is Micah Parsons in Dallas. Both those guys can now look at this and say, the Justin Jefferson deal is no outlier. The Nick Bosa deal is no outlier. And not only am I looking at like Maxx Crosby's deal and saying now, like, this has become the new norm for players of my caliber, Now I've got a chance to change the dynamic the same way that Nick Bosa changed the dynamic a couple of years ago when he really moved the market. And I think if you're Jamar Chase or you're Micah Parsons, you probably look at this now and say, I'm fully justified asking for $40 million per year. Okay, our second topic. The Seahawks have agreed to look around and at least entertain the possibility of trading DK Metcalf after Metcalf put in a request for a trade. For those who don't know, a big driver in this whole thing is the fact that DK only has a year left on his contract. And so the Seahawks' willingness to go to 30 million, 35 million per year on DK is obviously a factor in whether or not they would be willing to look at trading him. And that, I think, is a key part to all of this and how much they'd be able to get back for him, because what you're asking for from another team now is not just to give up high-end draft capital to get him, but then give up the sort of monetary asset it would take to sign him long-term. And you have to look at this again. If you're looking at other teams that might be interested, and there will be other teams interested, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Patriots, like teams that I think will knock on the door here and see what it would take to get DK Metcalf, you're already going to be giving up a new contract. You're going to be paying him at the top of the market or near the top of the market. And so, and this is a third contract for him. He's 27 years old, but this is a third contract for him. He's got some miles on his legs. He's got some injury history. So you're taking on all of that, and then you're also giving up another asset that allows you to put affordable talent on your team in the form of draft picks. So the Seahawks want a one for him. Are they going to be able to get a one and find a team that's willing to give up that contract? That's my question. Because the draft pick is just one piece of this. No one is going to give up high-end draft capital for 1 year of DK Metcalf. But if you can get him signed to an extension, then you would obviously think about it. And so that's where DK Metcalf has some control over this process, is that he doesn't have to agree to sign an extension with anybody. And again, a trade's not happening without an extension. At least I don't think so. So, like that puts the Seahawks in a position where they can ask for one. Maybe they can get a one. I don't know how likely it is that they do get a one. All right, finally, our third topic. The Chargers have released Joey Bosa. End of an era for that franchise. He is the last San Diego Charger, which makes me feel really old, but the last man standing from the 2016 San Diego Chargers. And it's wild to think about this being his 10th year in the league, but that's where we are. Joey Bosa has a chance to play a few more years in the league for sure. Whether or not he'd be a full-time guy, I don't know that. The Chargers obviously have some depth at the edge positions. The release of Joey Bosa makes you wonder where they stand right now with Khalil Mack, who's going to be a free agent. So that's obviously an open question. But I think, seeing what Bosa's impact was there over the years, certainly, I think he's probably a team Hall of Famer. And was a great player when he was at his peak, but he was hurt a lot. And so as he goes to the market, that's where the question is like, do you project him as a guy you're going to be able to get 8 games out of? You're going to be able to get 12 games out of? Are you going to be able to find a way to keep him healthy the whole year? And this isn't a guy who does the wrong things. That's the other part of it, is that this is a guy who has his own trainer. Like, he has hired his own trainer, his own staff. He does everything that he can to keep himself in the best position to stay healthy. And he's still been banged up. So it's sort of part of the equation with him, no matter how you slice it. And that's why I think the most likely scenario for Joey is probably going and chasing a championship with a team that's going to put him in a rotation. And that's where the idea of him going back and playing with his brother in San Francisco makes all the sense in the world. So that's something, you certainly could look at. You could see that happening. I think there are a couple other teams that make some sense. Anthony Lynn was his first pro coach. And Anthony Lynn's in Washington now. The Commanders need edge rushers. So Anthony Lynn could give Dan Quinn good background on Joey Bosa, what Joey Bosa is all about. Could the Commanders be a possibility? Brandon Staley is now with the Saints. If Brandon Staley and the Saints are looking for somebody to carry the torch for him, that could be a landing spot for Joey. And then there's Mike Vrabel, who was Joey Bosa's position coach at Ohio State. They've got a very strong relationship. could Joey Bosa wind up going to the Patriots? There will be some suitors out there for him, but I think the one we're all kind of keeping an eye on is whether or not he winds up going and playing with his brother in San Francisco. Appreciate you guys coming out. Again, keep it locked on the mmqb.com all weekend and into next week. We're going to have you covered pillar to post on free agency. Trades will be happening. We'll be talking a lot of drafts. Really, I mean, over the next couple of months, it's really busy, but this is one of those upticks over the next few days. So we'll have more content for you both here video-wise and over on the website. Be sure to check all of that out. Check out the MMQB podcast too. I've got an interesting hour-long discussion with Brian Hoyer, the 15-year NFL quarterback. We basically break down the position as a whole going into the offseason. So again, be sure to check that out on all your podcast platforms. And we will see you back here for another Breer Report next week.